Well, let's carry on then with our speakers. Lars Jensen is CEO of Vespucci Maritime. Ricardo Sánchez is Superior Officer of the Economic Affairs at the Division of Trade, Integration, and Infraestructure at the United Nations, ECLAC. And Diane Farrell from the United States via video. She's the Undersecretary of International Trade at the Department of Trade of the United States.
Make sure we've got the audio.
Muy bien.
All right. Gracias. Good morning.
Yes, sí, sí, señora.
Can people hear? Yes? Okay, very good. I thank you. Perfect. I want to say certainly good morning to my fellow panelists. I sincerely wish I was occupying that middle seat with the two gentlemen who have fascinating backgrounds, and I know it's going to be a very good discussion. I unfortunately was not able to travel as much as I would have liked to, but I am so absolutely delighted to be here with the conference attendees, especially AAPA Latino. I'm so grateful to the American Association of Port Authorities for their longstanding partnership and for organizing such a great event. Over the next couple of days, we will be discussing topics that are extremely relevant and have major impacts on trade and economic prosperity for the Americas. As each of you know well, tackling the climate and economic crisis requires ambitious partnerships to produce effective solutions with big impact. That's one of the reasons we are all gathered here today. The Biden-Harris administration has launched a coordinated whole-of-government plan to address climate change and capture economic opportunities, putting the United States on a permanent path to achieve net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050. All U.S. government agencies, including the U.S. Department of Commerce, are reviewing ways to align our work with this plan. As part of the plan, the Department of Commerce has been looking at the role trade will play in U.S. strategy. The trade agenda will support the Biden-Harris administration's comprehensive vision of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions by fostering U.S. innovation and the production of clean technology. Maritime logistics will play a significant part in this strategy. Maritime logistics is the backbone of trade, since 84% of the volume of trade in goods is transported by sea, representing 70% of global trade value. In this context, ports play a major role in ensuring a wide distribution of goods through supply chains, including those considered to be essential, such as food and medical supplies. When we speak about maritime logistics, we must stress the importance of the blue economy, which consists of all activities and technologies related to a sustainable approach to marine technology. This approach to marine technology is being adopted in places across the world, giving greater importance to oceans, especially in places where environmental issues have become a major priority. A blue economy is also a knowledge-based economy, looking to the sea not only for extraction of material goods, but also for data and information to address societal challenges and inspire solutions. Further, the United States recognized that conservation and environmentally sustainable management practices are pathways, not roadblocks, to enabling long-term economic development and growth. The International Trade Administration advances the Biden-Harris administration's climate agenda while delivering on its core mandate of strengthening U.S. industry competitiveness, promoting U.S. exports, attracting inward investment, and ensuring fair trade. To advance the Biden-Harris administration's climate and trade agenda, ITA focuses on 4 strategic initiatives. 1, promoting U.S. exports and inward investment. ITA brings all of its resources to bear to support American manufacturers and help American workers lead the global market in the production of climate-related technologies and low-carbon solutions. Through a wide range of export promotion programs, including trade missions, trade shows, and business matchmaking events, ITA connects U.S. companies with international buyers and partners looking for cutting-edge climate solutions and facilitates business investment into the United States. Number 2, removing, reducing, and preventing trade barriers. Through its commercial diplomacy efforts, ITA promotes policies in foreign markets to enable trade and investment in climate-related technologies and low-carbon solutions. This includes working to reduce or eliminate tariffs on goods, services, and technologies, advocating for a transparent and predictable regulatory climate, supporting intellectual property rights protection and enforcement, and seeking the adoption and implementation of strong industry-led environmental standards. These policies not only facilitate greater market access for U.S. firms, they also ensure a conducive business climate for local businesses and help nations better integrate into global supply chains. 3, enforcing trade laws and agreements. ITA's enforcement and compliance efforts help deter harmful foreign government policies and keep foreign markets open and fair to U.S. exports and investments. 4, supporting U.S. companies competing for foreign projects. ITA advocates on behalf of U.S. exporters, including those that offer clean technology solutions, by competing in foreign government tenders and encouraging fair and transparent procurement practices to level the playing field for U.S. companies. These efforts support hundreds of jobs in the United States. With these strategic objectives in mind, fostering economic recovery means promoting groundbreaking solutions and clean technologies, especially in critical sectors. We at ITA are also very fortunate to have a sister bureau, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that conducts the science that underpins the blue economy, from ocean observations to weather and climate monitoring and forecasting to maritime navigation services. These important data and research quite literally power global business by informing major investments and decisions. Additionally, NOAA has developed a blue economy strategic plan to, first, strengthen and improve NOAA data, services, and technological resources that contribute to the American blue economy. 2, collaborate with partners to support the growth of American business and entrepreneurship that contributes to the development and sustainability of the blue economy across the United States. And 3rd, identify and support the growth of sectors of the blue economy that will help accelerate the nation's economic recovery. The United States is a global leader in technology, innovation, commercialization, and the development of solutions that can sustainably, efficiently, and reliably support global climate ambitions. U.S. companies are not only deploying these products and services at home, but are also eager to provide the technologies and services needed to advance the climate goals of our trading partners. As companies draw from decades of experience and lessons learned addressing environmental challenges in the United States, and they have a proven track record of delivering innovative and reliable solutions all over the world. Many U.S. companies have already voluntarily set ambitious climate targets with regard to reducing their own carbon footprint and that of their upstream supply chains. In many instances, U.S. companies are committing to lowering their carbon footprint in their logistics operations, including maritime transportation. These companies are leaders in many of the sectors that are developing in climate-conscious ways, including traditionally carbon-intensive industries such as energy and infrastructure, ports included. The U.S. government is working hand in hand with the private sector to support our partners' efforts to achieve global climate ambitions. To do this, private sector-led economic growth is the healthiest model, market-driven, transparent, and financially sustainable. This is why the U.S. government is working with other governments to promote open and transparent business environments that attract private sector capital and develop new tools to mobilize and deploy climate finance solutions. ITA aims to expand public-private partnerships, foster business-to-business connections, and help partner governments set transparent, market-based, and best value procurement policies. The United States believes public-private partnerships are critical to combat the global climate and economic crisis. The private sector provides expertise in every corner of the economy, substantial capacity to invest in new infrastructure, and the ingenuity and drive to bring new innovations to market. We are eager to collaborate on a path to advance decarbonization in emissions-intensive sectors that cross borders such as transportation, including shipping. We are in a moment where we have a unique opportunity to create new technologies and new markets. Countries that prioritize efforts to foster these industries of the future will not only help reduce emissions both within and outside their borders, they will also reap the economic rewards of powering the global economic transformation. The United States believes in evaluating projects from a best value perspective and pursuing transparent, sustainable business practices to ensure that countries meet their development needs and maintain independence in their decision-making when building toward a sustainable future. We welcome ways to work together to better enable trade and private sector collaboration to promote low carbon solutions and enhance resiliency to climate change. I appreciate the opportunity to join you and look forward to discussing these topics further. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Traver, and I'm late, and I apologize for that. I'm the Vice President of AAPA North America for Business Development. I want to thank you all for coming today. We've heard some excellent comments from Acting Secretary Farrell, who, by the way, we share a home state of Connecticut together, and go Yukon, so we're all Huskies here. You know, earlier today, we heard from our incoming president, and we heard from Mario Cordero, and we heard from Chris Connor, all of the issues that have gone into the last 2 years. We've had COVID variants, we've had supply chain disruptions, we've had global economic problems, we had virtual homeschooling, which was a lot of fun if you had to go through that one. But there was, you know, a lot of issues are out there. I'd really like to take the opportunity for the panel today to talk about where we're going in the future. How do we set the normal? How do we get back to normal activities? And it was mentioned multiple times this morning that this is an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for the maritime industry and the port industry to shine and to go forward. So I'd like to quickly, obviously we've heard from Acting Undersecretary Farrell already. I want to introduce Lars Jensen next, the CEO of Vespucci Maritime in Denmark, and then we'll go on to Ricardo Sánchez, but go ahead, sir.
Thank you for the introduction. Right, thanks. And what I'm going to take you through here very quickly and very briefly is, let's call it the road to normality. What are we going to emerge into? But before I do that, let me make a very brief comparison. Imagine right now the state of the global supply chain is we are in a building that's on fire, which means that the solution at hand is we're going to keep pouring water on until the fire is put out. That makes sense. But when we then look at the point when the fire is put out, we're not going to continue to pour water on the building just to prevent new fires. That would be the completely wrong thing to do. What we do want to make sure we do going forward is we change the way we construct the building to limit the risk of new fires. And if fires were to emerge again, limit the risk of them spreading. What I'm saying here is the initiatives we need to undertake in the supply chain over the next 12 to 18 months to get back to normal are not the right initiatives for how do we then deal with the supply chain in a post-pandemic period. Those are two very different things. There are tactical elements right now to clean up the mess, and then there's dealing with the post-pandemic reality, which is very, very different. I don't think this, nope, not working. There we go. Now, the way to think about it, I'm only going to spend very limited time talking about how we got to where we are, but basically this is how we got to where we are. Every time there's been a minor disruption, we have ripples coming from it. Then you have pandemic, demand drops, vessel sailings gets canceled. That means empty containers end up in the wrong places. That increases freight rates. That means shippers get desperate to move cargo. More ships are put in. That creates congestion in the terminals. That means longer turn time for the trucks. Now we have a shortage of trucks. So on and so forth. And that leads us to where we are today. The problem is we are in a proverbial traffic jam in the global supply chain. And the honest reality is this is going to take a long time to fix. There is no easy short-term solution. It doesn't exist. Realistically, and I could spend hours talking about it, this is going to take at least 6 to 12 months to unravel. So we're looking towards the end of 2022 before we can hope for a normal world again. And that is the optimistic view if there's not too many curveballs thrown at us. Part of this traffic jam, of course, means we are soaking up capacity. Vessels that are sitting in queues cannot move cargo. And we're at a point where 12% of global capacity has basically been unavailable for months. 10 to 12% has been gone for most of this year. It is basically 3 times the event we saw when Hanjin went bankrupt a couple of years ago, and this is persisting. It's going to last months into the future. We have enough ships in the world. That's not the problem. The problem is they are not moving. When they're not moving, that means there's a fight. So there's a fight over the vessels that are available. This pushes up charter rates. So you're now seeing vessels that are being chartered out at up to $250,000 a day that used to cost $10,000. This means vessels are being removed, especially from smaller regional trades. There are ports, there are even island nations in the world right now that don't have enough capacity to service their region because vessels are pulled out and put into trades where they can command a much, much higher premium. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the congestion is clearly global. And if I look ahead for the next few months, the odds are this is going to get worse. It is not going to get better in the short term. That's, of course, not a very nice message, but think it through. The highest risk is and has been for months more major port shutdowns in China. Keep in mind, for COVID, it's not just a matter of how does COVID spread, it's about the political response to COVID. And China has made their position very clear over the last year. Just a few incidents will shut down an area. This has led to the shutdown of Yantian port. It led to the shutdown of one of the terminals in Ningbo. It led to the shutdown of air freight operations in Shanghai. We are only ever 2 sick port workers in Shanghai away from Shanghai port shutting down. That risk is not only still there, it seems to have heightened with the emergence of the new Omicron variant. So chances here are, if you're a gambling man, this might very well happen again. If you look at the US, there are multiple reasons here that we can also see this worsening. Increasing fuel prices put already stretched truckers under pressure. This might lead some of them to say, fine, I'm going to call it a day, I'm just not going to move. You have the risk of vaccination mandates. Half of them are not vaccinated. If they're suddenly not allowed to work, then we have another problem. We have negotiations with the unions coming up that has at least the potential of disruption. And from 2023, we have new environmental regulations. I get a deja vu. This is like IMO 2020 and low sulfur. We knew low sulfur was coming for 10 years, yet nobody really did anything until that was 12 months out, and it dawned upon everyone, oh my God, we got to do something. IMO 2023, same thing. There is not a good overview on what this is actually going to mean. Realistically, this might not be an issue on the major deep sea trades. This could be a potential big issue on any regional trade because they are serviced by older, smaller vessels that might actually have challenges living up to the new regulations. So we got plenty of additional topics ahead of us. This, of course, has led to spot rates surging far beyond anything that we have ever seen before. I'm not really going to dwell on that. And part of that is due to this extreme increase in demand, especially into the US. And one of the things here that is critically important to keep in mind is, as I showed you before, this is global. Part of this is we got a lot of vessels that are being drawn into the US due to a consumer boom. That boom, to a significant degree, is driven by a change in consumer behavior, away from buying services over to buying goods. This is a drastic change in behavior. We haven't seen anything like it for 3 generations. We have data going back to 1959, the entire history of container shipping. We've never seen consumers change behavior like this before. This is, of course, not because they chose to. This is the pandemic effect, which also means there is another disruptive force ahead of us. As the pandemic then gradually dissipates, or at least we'll learn to live with it, it's very likely the consumers there will change behavior back to where we came from. That means there is a spectrum ahead of us. At some point in time, we might see a huge drop in demand, which of course would be great for cleaning up congestion, not so great for demand and making money on logistics. So plenty of things that can change. Looking slightly further out, what we could also look at is underlying. The container shipping sector is in a cyclical upturn. It's just hidden underneath all this pandemic noise. We would have been that anyway, because there has been very low injection of capacity versus demand for the last few years. It's a normal cyclical upturn. The vessels that have been delivered means this upturn is likely going to end second half 2023 unless we get this impact from the IMO 2023 rules. That could mean that this upturn might continue even longer. Carriers have ordered a few of the ultra-large ones, but increasingly they're ordering new Panamaxes, which means that sure, vessels are not going to get larger on Asia-Europe, but they are indeed going to get larger in all other trades still. We're still going to see many more trades come in, and that also means we are still going to see a drive towards more larger ships, fewer weekly services, more transshipment. That's going to impact all regions, including the regions down here. So what will happen in 22 and 23? This is a transition period, getting away from the massive problems until we get to a new reality. Again, as I mentioned, operationally, if you are being super optimistic, you can make the case for 6 months. That appears highly unrealistic. More realistic is sometime second half 2022 if we don't get too many curveballs, which we might. And it is not going to be a smooth transition. It is going to be exceedingly volatile. You're going to see places around the world where suddenly congestion seems to evaporate. That is brilliant, only to then come back a month or two later. You're going to have a lot of these fits and starts. It's going to be a very turbulent period. It's not going to be a clean and easy transition. We got some dark numbers in terms of demand. There is cargo in containers not being moved, not being counted. Cargo at factories not being loaded into containers. Deferred production. So we have another surge of demand, and there is not a single number in the world showing how big that is. So in the short term, we're going to see more problems leading up to Chinese New Year. And are we then going to see somebody pay for building more resilience to fix the current problems? The short answer is no. We are not going to see a sustained willingness to pay for steel and cement. Don't make the mistake of thinking we are going to see customers be willing to have an armada of ships lying just in case, or to vastly overbuild on terminals just in case. That is not going to happen. We should expand in line with normal markets, but nobody is going to be willing to pay for resilience. And does that mean that we might run into this same problem again in the future? Actually, it does. Having a tenfold increase in freight rates might be unusual in container shipping, perfectly normal in other parts of shipping, because in other parts of shipping, they don't have a grotesque amount of overcapacity. And the container shipping industry is maturing and will also in the future not have a grotesque amount of overcapacity. So most of the time, everything will be fine. And then once in a blue moon, yeah, there will be a supply chain crunch, and we might see prices spike tenfold, just like we see completely normally in the other shipping sectors, because again, nobody is willing to have an armada of extra ships lying around just to cater for those few spike events. Not going to happen. And let me then finish on what is this post-pandemic reality that we're going to emerge into. Keep in mind, we were going to get there anyway. The pandemic just accelerates it. There is a major fight over logistics. This is for the control of the cargo owner. This is a fight that's been fought between the existing freight forwarders, digital freight forwarders, carriers jumping into this, major diversified cargo owners like Amazon and Alibaba jumping into the freight, and you even have some terminal operators themselves entering into this. This is going to be a massive battle over logistics that will unfold over the coming years. Digitalization is going to be driven extremely hard, but don't make the mistake of thinking if you digitalize, then you will become profitable. That would be a clean mistake. Digitalization is what you need to do to stay alive, but it will not make you profitable. Think about it from this perspective. If everything goes according to plan, nobody touches it in terms of the information. It runs automatically. But when things do not go according to plan in logistics, there's always something that goes wrong. Then there's a breakdown of a crane, there's a truck that runs off the road, there's a typhoon, whatever have you. How good are your people in then handling that plan B? That's where competition is going to move to. But you're not going to be part of that competition unless you truly digitalize end to end. And that brings me to the next point, the resilience. The resilience does not come from more steel and more cement. It comes from better usage of data. That comes from having the ability to predict when there might be bottlenecks, to avoid them in the first place. That requires a level of data integration across all supply chain stakeholders globally. There are a few small local initiatives and port community systems. That is wholly insufficient. This needs to be a global drive. We need better data standards. We need to exchange data across shipping lines, ports, port authorities, terminals, trucking companies, rail companies, warehousing firms, the whole lot. That is where we're going to move in order to have a more resilient future. Again, this will take time. Once we get to that point, you will also see, you're going to see an increased reliance on fewer but larger hubs. This is driven by the larger vessels I told you about. So there's another battle that's ahead of us in this decade on the container terminal side, not so much for import-exports, but especially for transshipments. What you will see over the next decade is we will see larger transshipment hubs, but fewer of them. And this is going to be a dangerous game for the transshipment terminals, because on one hand, you need to expand to have an attractive product to the carriers, but you have no guarantee you might actually land them. So whereas the carriers have spent the last 20 years first building massive amounts of overcapacity in sort of a game theoretic approach, that's the prospect they now face, especially transshipment terminals going forward. That was an extremely rapid and condensed view. As you might be able to hear, I could talk about this topic for hours, but I won't take more time away from the rest of my panel. So thank you very much.
Let me now introduce Ricardo Sánchez, Senior Economic Affairs, Trade, Integration, Infrastructure, ECLAC at the United Nations. Ricardo, thank you.
Muy buenos días. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
To be paired with my colleagues at in the panel, yeah. Then this device is clicking. Then I go forward. My intervention today is to talk about the outlook of trade and maritime trade and supply chain crisis from the point of view of freight rates. And, sorry, okay. Talking about GDP, the world GDP, after the, and local GDPs, after the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, suffered a contraction of 6.8% in the last 120 years, the worst in the last 120 years. And the worst performance of all developing regions. The growth rate of 5.9% is expected in 2021 and 2.9% by 2022. However, as you can see, after the worst of the pandemic in 2020, international trade in goods is rapidly recovering. It is interesting to observe two related phenomena. The volume traded, the volume traded in the middle of 2020 was the worst in comparison with the previous 6 years, and the drop in international trade had begun prior to the pandemic, showing declines since the end of 2018. The recovery since the third quarter of 2020, and especially during 2021, has again led to the historical trend, and the current projection is considerably higher than what it had estimated at the end of last year. In the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, the 2020 drop in exports reached 10%, and that of imports 16%. But in 2021, a recovery of 24 and 27% is expected in both directions. The sectors most affected in goods were automotive, textiles, clothing, and footwear. Agribusiness and agriculture were more resilient as they are essential goods. talking about containerized trade, to look at the long-term effect of the pandemic, it is better to compare 2021 to 2019. For the January-September period, this shows that overall trade has grown by 5.8% over the 2-year term. For all regions, except North America and Australasia, exports are higher, whilst for imports, only the Middle East and India failed to register growth. The recovery for Latin America is stronger in importations, is 23% with regard to 2020, and 11% regarding 2019. Exportations show a lighter performance, but in any case, we are facing a strong recovery and a better situation regarding even the pre-pandemic status. Yeah. Freight rates, unlike the other indicators shown above, have exhibited a very different trend during the pandemic. And it is that in the midst of the difficulties due to the falls in transport and trade, they began a process of increase that has taken them to record heights. In the screen, you can compare the world average transport values of a 40-foot container, and it allows you to observe the difference, the very, very different behavior between the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. Just to give an example, the value registered last week in between 3 and 4 and 5 times higher than in 2019 and 2020, although increase in demand is not so higher. Yeah. Then, in my opinion, the demand side is not the main problem facing this freight rates increasing process. Yeah? Then, this is my question, why the behavior of freight rates? The pandemic has thrown the entire supply chain into a turmoil, into problems, yeah? But the usual explanations are partial. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, supply chains have suffered significant disruptions, which cannot be attributed to a single cause, but are the result of the interaction of several causes. Then, obviously, the very complex supply-demand equilibrium and relationship between demand and supply. This is one main factor of the problem of the freight rates, but the operational problems in the entire supply chain, and especially important is the effect, the impact on stocks and production delays. The consequences of these disruptions are congestions, lack of containers, shortage of warehouses, a lack of workforce in terminals, shortage of drivers in the logistic chain, delays accumulative in the maritime services that have unhinged the reliability of the service, and supply interruptions from the usual sources, among others. In turn, these consequences aggravate the causes, generating a vicious circle. But in addition, it causes productive interruptions in various industries due to the lack of input. Yeah, you know about the longer travel time, the problem of Suez Canal during the last year, but the congestion in ports, etc. But for instance, in this case, the semiconductor delivery delay time is higher. Then this is an impact over the entire logistics and productive chains. Yeah, it's the same with the reduction in the retail stocks. In this case, in the United States, but it's all around the world. Yeah? Then, given the initial drop in demand, the economic agents reduced the inventories, yeah, of final products and inputs to a minimum. Yeah? And this was a very negative impact on the industry of logistics, but in the productive sector too. Then, my big question is, will freight rates ever decrease? Not using the crystal ball. I just only will mention some factors that there are in line to explain the decreasing process, possibly with not rapidly act. The reasons for thinking this way point to the uncertainty. You know this word, uncertainty, yeah? We have several years talking about uncertainty, but uncertainty is here. Jan Hoffman, my friend, usually talks about this, but I want to reinterpret the process. The reasons for thinking this way, obviously, uncertainty surely, but uncertainty caused by health emergencies, yeah? Such as a possible due to the appearance of a new variant of coronavirus a few years ago. Even the stock markets values fell, and the delay in arriving new ships until 2023, taking into account the construction orders issued during the pandemic. To this, we must add the ongoing measures in industry to contain climate change and decarbonization, which are very necessary and welcome, but add costs, and the availability of new ships. In other words, everything is time and money. Then, for my last slide, sorry, is all the previous reasons are understandable, but it is necessary to mention the structural issue of the shipping concentration, the vertical integration in the industry. This is obviously a reason for these freight rates going up and going up. And finally, I want to share my own theory, which is additive to this. Yeah? I am talking about a risk premium for or facing the external shocks. This new, in my opinion, risk premium is underlying the pricing in maritime transport. Is here to stay for the future. It is possibly a lesson learned from the previous crisis, and I think it will prevent a return to previous level of freight rates. Then, thank you very much. Let me switch to Spanish prior to give the floor to the moderator. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. On my way on the plane over to the 29th Congress of AAPA Latino, and the 9 kept resounding in my head, and I remembered that the first Congress I attended was the 9th Congress, from the 9th to the 29th. And I always came in my capacity as officer of the United Nations, which makes me very proud. I've been more than 20 years as an officer at United Nations, but I want to tell you, this is the last time I come to APA in my capacity as United Nations officer. I am close to saying goodbye forever to the organization I've served for so many years. So next year, if I'm invited again, it will be in a different capacity, to continue, of course, at the service of this industry but again, in a position in the private sector. Thank you very much. Solo quisiera hacer unas preguntas cortas y breves. Se lo voy a pedir primero a la secretaria Farrell.
Public policy and industry at the Department of Commerce. And in your mind, you know, we just made a major investment in the United States, maybe a historic investment in our ports in the infrastructure bill. What do you what are those factors that are in that bill and other policies that are coming out of the Biden administrations that will support both the Latin American side of our commerce chain and the US side?
Here are the thoughts that I have. It was very, very interesting to listen to Lars and Ricardo. And I really appreciated both their observations and the statistical information that they provided in their presentations. And I have to admit, as I was listening, and I completely agree with them that we're looking at near-term, midterm, and long-term challenges. And the expression, let's not waste a good crisis, comes to mind. And so when we talk about the immediate steps that the Biden-Harris administration have taken, including, of course, the recent passage of the infrastructure bill and the infusion of investment that's going to be coming especially as it relates to supply chain, to U.S. ports, to U.S. infrastructure, to help the movement of goods and to address some of the learnings, even though you're probably right, Lars, that, you know, will we be fully prepared for the next crisis? Probably not, but we'll at least be better informed and probably have a better take on what it is that we can do. There was an executive order, Kevin, that you'll recall that came from the president called America's Supply Chains. This was obviously in response to what we've been dealing with the disruptions due to COVID-19. And I do want to say to Ricardo that I appreciate our not just suggesting that it was one problem that has gotten us to where we are today, but that chart that you showed that shows a series of the challenges that have led us to this point and have probably accelerated the need for solutions. So we have the America's Supply Chains Executive Order, and there are three specific components to that I think are worthy of note. First is the comprehensive trade strategy to support resilience and to support U.S. competitiveness. The second is to incorporate supply chain resilience into an ongoing review of the U.S.-China trade policy. And the third is to ensure the United States works with our allies and partners to decrease vulnerabilities in global supply chains, to secure the supply of critical goods and strengthen our collective supply chain resilience. There's a task force that the president has pulled together. Our department, the U.S. Department of Commerce, works directly with industry stakeholders to address both the near-term supply demand mismatches that we have at present, but to look at solutions to alleviate bottlenecks and supply chain constraints. We are very data-driven. So again, very pleased. I think, Lars, you were the one that mentioned about data integration, spending a tremendous amount of time looking at how to ensure that the data that we receive is helping to guide decisions going forward, or to flag those problems that could be coming down the line in terms of either near-term risks or vulnerabilities. Very grateful to John Porcari, the administration's new port envoy, for the work that he's doing in this area. And we are actually also a part of an interagency task force that's being National Economic Council. And again, this is where data is meeting demand, so to speak, in terms of our efforts to better match. The only other thing that I will say, because I do want to once again just mention the importance of climate change, we are in a very historic, once in a generational moment where we have an opportunity to not just deal with the 300 ships that are right now, waiting off of California, but to really talk about, and I really appreciated Ricardo's including, climate change, potential climate change premiums, or just or just adjustments in his slide when we look at the future. This is a moment in time to build this in. There is no question, especially for this industry, that the more that we focus on a global basis in partnership on addressing what we can all see now coming as the future, that we will probably have invested better today if we look at this as we look to our rebuilding than trying to catch up with it in another 5, 10, 20 years when it's going to be even more difficult, more challenging, or actually not even attainable. So those are my preliminary thoughts, and look forward, of course, to hearing from my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Lars, you painted a kind of dark picture there for us. What do you how do we get to normal? How do we get back? You said end of 2022, but what are the steps along that road in your mind that get us back to that next normal?
You mean apart from good old-fashioned blood, sweat, and elbow grease?
And those are always going to be there.
But the thing is, that is what's going to get us there. The challenge here is, it's no different than when you're stuck in this massive 10-mile queue on the highway. Even when the accident has been cleared away, it takes time. There is no specific resource you can throw at this problem and make it go away quickly. Of course, we need to do whatever we can, and this is again where I can't stress also the aspect of data integration enough. Because at the end of the day, everybody has done, I would say, the right thing over the last year, and yet it has led us to this problem because everybody has looked in isolation. What should I do as a terminal? Then I change, but that pushes the problem down the line. Then the trucking companies change, then the shipping lines change. So you have to see it end to end, and there is right now very, very poor transparency through the entire supply chain, which prevents these solutions from taking hold. So right now, it basically is time.
As a follow-up, do we need, in the US, we talk about a national supply chain policy, or transportation policy, which actually we don't have, right? Is there a global solution that the entire industry in the Western Hemisphere could be pursuing?
Yeah, I mean, let me be slightly provocative here and say, let's be realistic. The U.S. is just one country amongst the rest of the world. The majority of cargo doesn't even touch the U.S. And all the cargo in and out of the U.S. comes from a lot of places around the world. Let's be counterfactual. Let's say you had good data visibility through the entire supply chain before the pandemic came. That meant you could already see months in advance that, hang on a second, there's too much cargo now coming from all weird places of the world, and we don't have enough trucking when it arrives smack in Minnesota, for example. You could have predicted these bottlenecks, and thereby you could also have prevented some of them from even happening. So going forward, what we need is more than local initiatives, and US is a local initiative. We need them to be global. We need to build on, you need standards. That's where DCSA is doing a pretty good job. As far as I understand, T4 is trying to do the same thing in the terminal space. We need those standards up and running ASAP, and then there needs to be a pressure on all the supply chain stakeholders to actively share their data.
Thank you very much. Ricardo, you gave us some great numbers, and I think you probably just touched the surface of the data you have. How do you see us moving forward into normalization?
Using the crystal ball?
One of you guys has got to solve this problem right now. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, I share the opinion of Lars. Yeah, each one is making its job, it works, and everyone is concerned about the future. I think the challenges are really huge, really, really huge. But my concern is about the relationship between the terminals and the surface transportation by one side, at terminals and the shipping lines by the other side, because ports are in the middle of this problem, yeah. But ports are not the reason of this problem, yeah. Ports are making really a wonderful work, but the entire supply chain is absolutely affected, is under attack. I don't know. Then I think my concern is about cooperation. Yeah, I think we need more cooperation among ports and more cooperation among the terminals, the environments of the rest of terminals in the port area. Yeah, and mainly with the surface transportation, because in the exit of terminals, we have a huge congestion. In my opinion, obviously, technology is a must, yeah, but cooperation is the key word.
Thank you, sir. Well, we are unfortunately out of time. We could probably go for another 2 hours with these two gentlemen and discuss this. But again, I just want to thank you all for joining us here today. I am, new to AAPA. I've been here since August. And this is my first time at the APA Latino Conference, and I really cannot wait for next year. I'm looking forward to working with all of you to grow this event and to grow the relationship between AAP America and AAP Latino. And if you have any ideas, suggestions, comments that you'd like to get to me, I'm here all day, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all. Have a great rest of the Congress. Thank you very much.